Good evening, everyone.
Good evening, everyone, and a very warm welcome. I am Priyanka Sharma, a research scholar from Government J. Yoganandam, Chhattisgarh College, Raipur, and I cordially invite you all to this international webinar on Italy in the imagination of romantic writers, organized by ISPEL. ISPEL stands for Indian Society for the Promotion of English Language and Literature. Established in September 2020, ISPEL has been working continuously, rather diligently, to reach out to English language and literature learners, simply to facilitate, elevate. And it's quite exciting that it has started to spread its branches all over India. The topic for today's webinar is Italy in the imagination of romantic writers. A beautiful and historical city, Italy, has been inspiration for the works of art and literature like dramas, novels, poetry, and travel writings for ages now. The famous German philosopher Goethe once said, "Only in Rome it is possible to understand Rome." Well, I have never been to Italy before, but I'm sure Miss Elizabetha Marino today is going to make us all want to visit Italy soon. Now I cordially invite Dr. Smita Ajgaonkar Nayak, the Master of Ceremonies for today's event. Dr. Smita Nayak is an Assistant Professor of English, PES, RSN College of Arts and Science, Ponda, Goa. Dr. Smita is a passionate teacher of English for more than a decade and has been a researcher per excellence. She has more than a score of research publications and several national and international seminars and conference presentations. Two of her books on poetic pantheism in William Wordsworth and Vasant Sawant and Protest in Kamla Das and Imtiaz Dharkar are quite popular. Her poems are published in journals by of repute. Besides her teaching and writing in English, she is actively engaged in writing and translating in Marathi and Konkani. This makes her multilingual comparative literature, especially poetry, reach to the academia. Apart from this, she has been comparing programs in English and Marathi at national and international level and has been instrumental in imparting these skills to her students as well. She also has organized workshops on effective communication skills. Now, I welcome Smita ma'am. Smita ma'am, are you there?
You're not audible.
I'm not audible.
Smita, you're muted. Smita,
Okay.
you're muted.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Priya. Actually, I wanted to interrupt Priya ji to tell me that is too much of praise you are doing at the outset, and I wanted to tell her, please, that that's enough. Master of Ceremonies do not need any introduction, and especially, yes, where resource person like Professor Elizabetha ma'am is there, and all these stalwarts, other professors are there. Definitely, we feel that okay, we are definitely going to listen to something very, very interesting today. So, before I introduce today's very well-known personality amongst us, let me give best wishes to you all on Valentine's Day. ISPEL has been very, very keen on organizing and inviting people par excellence, and we have been enjoying various sessions the last few months. Today's resource person, we have amongst us Professor Elizabetha Marino ma'am and Professor Jaya Kapoor ma'am amongst us. Ma'am Elizabetha is an associate professor, University of Rome. Elizabetha ma'am is the author of 4 monographs, a volume on the figure of Tamerlane in British and American literature, an introduction to British Bangladeshi literature. This was in 2005, previous one being in 2000. A study on the relationship between Mary Shelley and Italy. This was in 2011. An analysis of the romantic dramas on the mythological subject. This was in 2016. She has translated poems by Maria Mazziotti Gillian, collected in a volume in 2006. Between 2001 and 19, she edited 10 and co-edited as well collections of essay and a special forum of Journal of Transnational American Studies dedicated to Sao Ling C. Wong. She has published extensively on the English Romantic writers, especially Mary Shelley and P.B. Shelley. That reminds me, if winter comes, can spring be far behind? Indian diasporic literature, travel literature, Asian American and Asian British literature, Italian American literature are her areas of expertise. Ma'am, we are indeed very honored and we are feeling very happy to have you on board. Requesting ma'am to deliver her address. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And namaste, everybody. And I'm really honored and delighted to be here with you to share some thoughts on one of my favorite subjects, that is the Romantic literature in connection with Italy. And so obviously I'm really thankful for this invitation. And I'm sure you're all aware of the fact that especially the second generation of Romantic writers had connections with Italy. You can think of John Keats, who died in Italy on the 23rd of February, 200 years ago. So as the bicentenary now of his death. And Italy for him represented, in a way, the mirage of recovering from a condition that he had, the tuberculosis. And you're all aware of the fact that also Lord Byron was very much fond of Italy, fond of the Italian landscape, the Italian people, and he wholeheartedly embraced also the cause of Italian liberation from the tyrants. But I will focus in my talk especially on Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley, who spent a huge amount of time in Italy. In actual fact, as you're all aware, Percy Shelley died in Italy, but not all of you are aware of the fact that Mary Shelley returned to Italy 2 more times. She came back to Italy in 1840, and then once again in 1842 and 1843, so in the last years of her life. So she continued to be connected with the land she regarded as the land of her soul and her imagination. Talking about Mary Shelley, for example, she wrote 2 novels focused on Italy, Valperga and The Last Man, whose frame narrative is actually set in Italy, set in the area around Naples. And 10 out of her 23 short stories are set in Italy. So Italy was very important to her. And she also wrote some critical essays connected with Italy and the Italian imagination, the Italian national character, which she deeply appreciated. Let me first of all tell you a little bit about the trouble that she undertook together with Percy Shelley and together with their 2 children, Clara Everina and William Wilmouse, who in actual fact spoke Italian much better than English. So Mary Shelley and Percy Shelley arrived in Italy on the 30th of March, 1818. And the reasons that prompted them to go to Italy were several. First of all, the climate. Percy Shelley was convinced that he had consumption. Obviously, he didn't have consumption, but he wanted to visit Italy. He wanted to enjoy the warmer and milder climate.
Is ma'am audible?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, he wanted
Please continue.
to see. antiquities. He wanted to see the beautiful places that he had read about in many travel narratives. But both of them also wanted to go off the beaten track. This is a peculiarity of the relationship between Percy Shelley, Mary Shelley, and Italy. They did not just visit the most important cities. Obviously, they went to Genoa, they went to Milan, they went to Turin, then they went to Venice, Pisa, Florence, Rome, Naples. But they also visited the small villages, the surrounding areas, and they mixed with people, with normal, with ordinary people. So they did not want to stick to the environment where the expat were. So they did not just mingle with the British and the Americans that were in Italy. They wanted to meet the Italians. They wanted to speak to them. They wanted to learn their language, and they even took classes of Italian language before coming to Italy and while they were in Italy. But I should say that the perception that Percy Shelley and Mary Shelley had of both Italy and the Italians was completely different. Percy Shelley was more critical, whereas Mary Shelley was more welcoming and enthusiastic about Italy and the Italian population. So, to give you an idea of what Percy Shelley thought of Italy, I will quote a passage from a letter that he wrote to Thomas Love Peacock from Naples in 1818. And I quote, "There are two Italies, one composed of the green earth and transparent sea and the mighty ruins of ancient time, and the aerial mountains and the warm radiant atmosphere which is interfused through all things. The other consists of the Italian. One is the most sublime and lovely contemplation that can be conceived by the imagination of man. The other is the most degraded, disgusting, and odious." So, in Percy Shelley's view, there was a split. The Italian people were degraded, whereas the Italian atmosphere, the Italian antiquities, the Italian landscape were the most beautiful scenes that any man could possibly contemplate. So the dream of Percy Shelley was the dream of many other British expat living in Italy. That is, Italy without the Italians. You should understand that the perception that in those days many British had of the Italians was a perception of a population unfit for self-rule, a childlike population that somehow needed the tyrants because they were not capable of self-governing themselves. So this is a perception that many British have even nowadays of the Italian population, and somehow they might be not far from the truth. But anyway, Percy Shelley felt very strongly for Italy, but he was not at all sympathetic for the Italians. And he was also very much concerned for his friend Lord Byron, who, on the other hand, was really an enthusiastic about the Italian population, and he loved the Italians and he freely mingled with them. So I'm going to quote another passage from the same letter in which Percy Shelley criticized Lord Byron for the very fact that he was mixing with the Italian population. I'm quoting, It is a kind of obstinate and self-willed folly in which Byron hardens himself. The fact is that first, the Italian women with whom he associates are perhaps under the moon, the most ignorant, the most disgusting, the most bigoted. Countesses smell so strongly of garlic that an ordinary Englishman cannot approach them. Well, Lord Byron is familiar with the lowest sort of these women, the people his gondolieri pick up in the streets. He associates with wretches who seem almost to have lost the gait and physiognomy of men, and who do not scruple to avow practices which are not only not named, but I believe seldom even conceived in England. So Italy was the land of degradation. Italy was the land where everything that was illicit in Britain was allowed. And therefore it was some kind of living hell for the British population. So he did not like the Italians very much. And Percy Shelley was also very strong against Catholicism. He deeply hated Catholic religion. He considered the Catholic God as a tyrant and the Catholic hierarchies as corrupt and contemptible. And this can be perceived in one of the plays that he wrote while he was in Italy. I am talking about The Cenci, a play, a tragedy in actual fact, that he composed between 1818 and 1819, in which the main character, Il Conte Cenci, Count Cenci, was a strong Catholic, and yet he was a tyrant. He raped his own daughter, and he committed all the atrocities that you can possibly think of. So for him, Catholicism and murder, crime used to go hand in hand. And to give you another idea of this concept that he expressed in every work that he wrote while he was in Italy, I'm going to quote another work that is entitled The Colosseum, which is an unfinished short story in which Percy Shelley wrote that Catholicism was the most horrible religion in the world. Therefore, Percy felt very strongly against Catholicism, against the Italians, but he was obviously fond of the landscape and fond of the climate. We know that Percy died in Italy, but there is a detail that not all of you are aware of. That is the fact that he wanted to go back to Britain. He didn't want to stay any longer in Italy, and this is expressed in many of the letters that he wrote around 1820, 1821 to Thomas Love Peacock and to other friends that were in Britain. And I'm just going to quote another short passage. Oh, that I could return to England. How heavy a way when misfortune is added to exile and solitude, as if the measure were not full, heaped high on both. Oh, that I could return to England. So he didn't want to spend longer time in Italy because he originally felt that Italy was a paradise for exiles, but then he felt, because of the population, because of the ignorance of the population, because of Catholicism, he felt that it was no longer a paradise, but it was just the land of exile that he wanted to get away from. Mary Shelley felt very differently about Italy and the Italians. We know that when Percy Shelley died, she went back to England, but not because she did not want to spend any more time in what she felt as her second mother country, but because of practical reasons. We know that Sir Timothy Shelley told her that unless she came back, Percy Florence would not get any allowance, any yearly allowance from him. So she was forced to go back to England. But in the letters that she wrote as soon as she came back from Italy to England, she signed herself exile, your affectionate exile. This is because she felt that her real mother country was Italy and not Britain. So she was an exile while she was in England, not while she was in Britain. Now, in her output, she strived very, very hard to change the perception of the Italians that many British citizens shared. As I mentioned before, the Italians as a childlike population unfit for self-governing. So she wanted instead to show that the only problem that Italian population had was the tyranny of the mind. What she called the cultural starvation of the Italians. In her opinion, the tyrants that ruled over Italy, the tyrants took advantage. There is somebody. Okay.
Please mute yourself.
The tyrant. Okay. The tyrant. Had they done that, the Italians would have become again capable of self-governing. So ignorance was the instrument, was the tool that the tyrants used in order to rule over the population. So by making people ignorant, they were manipulating them. So Mary Shelley also criticized her compatriots who traveled to Italy because she said that many of the British that went to Italy did not really go there in order to see Italy and know the Italians and look with their own eyes at the situation. They just wanted to flaunt with their compatriots the fact that they had visited Italy. So, in her opinion, they were just tourists, not travelers. So they didn't want to know the population. They just wanted to look superficially at Italy for the sake of being able to say, oh, I have been to Italy. So that was the fashion of the day. And she wrote a short story in 1824 entitled Recollections of Italy, and she published it on the London Magazine, in which she described a dialogue, a paradoxical dialogue between a man who is absolutely fond of Great Britain and doesn't want to see anything else beyond the borders of Albion, and Melville, who on the other hand is fond of Italy. And I'm going to quote a passage highlighting what Melville thought of the tourist visiting Italy. Shall I tell you, continued Melville with a smile, how you passed your time in Italy? You traversed the country in your traveling chariot, cursing the postilions and the bad inns. You arrived at a town and went to the best hotel, at which You found many of your countrymen, near acquaintances in England, but hailed as bosom friends in that strange land. You walked about the streets of a morning, expecting to find gorgeous temples and cyclopean ruins in every street in Florence. You came to a broken pillar, wondered what it could be, and laughed at the idea of this being one of the relics which you wise countrymen came so far to see. You lounged into a coffee house and read Galignani, and then perhaps wandered with equal apathy into the gallery where, if you were not transported to the seventh heaven, I can undertake your defense no further. So basically, she was criticizing all the superficial attitude of the British tourist who just looked at the most important tourist sites just for the sake of, thinking, I've seen this, I've seen this, I've seen this, but without really wanting to know what was behind, or really inquiring with the population, or talking to the population, or knowing the culture. They just read the tourist guides and, said, okay, I've seen this, I've seen that. And that was the end of it. She also published another travelogue, another short story connected with the travelogue entitled The English in Italy in 1826. And she published it in the Westminster Review. Between the tourist or the mere superficial traveler and what she called the Anglo-Italian. So the mere traveler was superficial and he was affected by a syndrome that she humorously calls stay-at-home-ativeness. So it's the syndrome that brings somebody to travel just with the body, but the mind is stuck in his or her homeland. So just, like automatons, the body travels, but the mind is not really there. The Anglo-Italian, conversely, is somebody that wants to join the two cultures, wants to merge the two cultures, wants to understand the depth of the host country. And she considered Lord Byron as a sort of forefather for all the Anglo-Italians, and she regarded herself as an Anglo-Italian. And I tell you more, Mary Shelley wrote some journalistic pieces in which she signed herself Anglo-Italian. So instead of writing her own name, she signed Anglo-Italian because she regarded herself as partly British and partly Italian. And she kept this attitude for all her life. If you think of her journal, for example, the journal where she wrote all the important happenings in her life, and she kept the journal for all her life until the end of her days. There are pages and pages, even at the end of the journal, written in pure Italian, because for her, Italy was her mother country just as much as Britain. And as I told you, she went back to Italy 2 more times, in 1840 and then in 1842, 1843. The reasons why she visited Italy again are multiple. First of all, she wanted to show Percy Florence all the places that had been so important to her and to Percy Shelley. Percy Shelley is buried in Rome, and so is William, Mary Shelley's son, whereas Clara Verena is buried in Venice. So, I mean, Italy was the land also that hosted the last travel, as we can call it, the last travel of three important people in her life. But she also wanted to visit again the country of her heart in a very important moment. In the 1840s, just as well as in the 1820s, when Mary Shelley was there first, Italy was struggling for unification. The Italians were trying very hard to shake off the yoke of tyrants. They were trying very hard to become independent and to become one nation. And Mary Shelley strongly believed in the power of Italians. Not all of you know, maybe, that she also had some kind of romantic attachment for Ferdinando Gatteschi, who was an Italian expat living in Britain that she wanted to support. And in actual fact, the proceeds of her travelogue that she wrote in 1844, entitled Rambles in Germany and Italy in 1840, 1842, 1843. So the proceeds of the sales were given to Ferdinando Gatteschi to support his activity and to support his ideas. So she was very generous up until to the very last moment to the Italians. Now, the travelogue that she wrote is very interesting because as you can possibly imagine, she could not speak openly about the Italian situation because of censorship, because also of danger. She was based near the lakes in the north of Italy. She was based near Milan, and the situation there was actually rather critical. The Austrians had spies everywhere, and therefore she had to be very careful about what she wrote. So this travelogue is very interesting because it could be regarded as a pastiche. So on the one hand, there are pages and pages and pages devoted to the description of the landscape, the beautiful landscape of Lake Como, the beautiful works of art. She describes the art galleries that she saw. So apparently this is just a normal, a standard appreciation of the beauties of Italy. But there are sentences scattered here and there, and there are also chapters in the travelogue in which she deals with the Italian political situation. For example, talking about Leopoldo di Toscana, the situation in Tuscany, where there was a tyrant like everywhere else in Italy, she says, and I quote, "Tyranny is with us because she considered herself as part of the Italian population. Tyranny is with us, a serpent hid among flowers. And I, for one, sympathize with the sentiment of a Florentine poet." And she quotes in Italian, "Odio il tiranno che col sonno uccide." That is, I hate the tyrant that kills you with sleep. Because in her opinion, stripped by the tyrants, stripped of the possibility of acquiring culture, Italian people could be easily manipulated. So she describes the Italian population as almost half asleep because they could not use even the culture of the past. They were prevented from studying. Universities were controlled. University professors were jailed. And every intellectual activity was severely sanctioned. And communication, intercommunication was severely sanctioned. She talks about, for example, what happened even in Rome, in the Rome area, where the Pope was another tyrant in her view. The Pope actually prevented the construction of the railroad from happening in his territories, because the railroad would have implied more communication, more possibility of interchange, whereas isolation and some sort of intellectual slumber, let's call it in this way, would have prevented the Italian people from taking arms and, fighting for their own independence and their own ideals. Mary Shelley, unlike Lord Byron, did not support the so-called Carboneria. Carbonari were some kind of secret societies that wanted to use violence to dethrone the tyrants. So Mary Shelley did not support violence as a means for resurrecting the Italian population. She didn't believe that you should oppose violence to violence. She believed in the power of culture. She believed in the power of mental awakening. And this is the reason why in the travelogue, immediately after the chapter in which she delves into the failure of Carboneria, because Carboneria was too violent, she juxtaposes to that a chapter in which she praises the works by Manzoni, the works by Massimo d'Azeglio, Giovan Battista Nicolini, Arnaldo da Brescia, for example, provides the initial quotation for the travelogue. So she believes in the power of culture, because just like Percy Shelley, she was firmly convinced that poets and writers were the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And I would like to conclude, since I think that my half an hour has come to an end, I would like to conclude with a quotation from this travelogue, in which Mary Shelley actually expresses her wishes for the Italian population. And this wish is really important for the Italians even nowadays, that we are facing also not just a health crisis, but also a political crisis. And I quote, "The time must come when again the Italians will take a high place among nations. Their habits, fostered by their governments, alone are degraded and degrading. Alter this, and the country of Dante and Michelangelo and Raphael still exists." Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for that wonderful address. Very, very percipient and insightful, very in-depth. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
with the kind permission of Professor Ghanshyam sir and Shami, I think the floor is open for Q&A and the discussion.
Absolutely, Smita.
Yes, yes.
This has given wonderful insight so that the people can ask questions and comment on this wonderful lecture.
Thank you so much.
Should I take the questions from chat box?
Yeah, please.
Yes, yes. There are no questions as such. There are so many compliments, ma'am. Excellent lecture, very nice, insightful deliberation, great analysis, absolutely amazing session. You shed newer lights. So many of them. Participants, if anybody has any question, anything, please unmute yourself.
Later.
I would like another lecture from you. Why not?
It would be my pleasure, my absolute pleasure.
Kian Pishka sir, do you have any query or question?
Hello everybody. No, I don't have, because it was a very great one and I enjoyed from your lecture. Thank you.
Thank
it was
you.
very great.
Thank you. Can we have a relationship of our book Frankenstein with the love of Italy? Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for this question, because there is a connection between Frankenstein and Italy. Even though Frankenstein was published, as you know, in 1818, that is before Mary Shelley actually arrived in Italy. But still, there is a very strong bond between Italy and Frankenstein. Elizabeth Lavenza, the future bride of Victor Frankenstein, is the daughter of an Italian patriot. It is spelled out that basically the father of Elizabeth Lavenza was in jail in one of the Austrians' jails because he supported the independence of Italy. So even before arriving in Italy, actually Mary Shelley had a passion for Italy. And I will tell you more. She started studying Italian and reading in Italian when she was 14, 15. Because obviously also William Godwin had a very strong interest in Italy and the Italian political situation, and therefore he infused this love for Italy also in his daughter. So actually she started well before even thinking of visiting Italy, she started studying Italian.
Aliza,
Ma'am, Dr. Shobharani ma'am has asked something. Any references on this area, ma'am, please, she says.
In what way, any reference?
Dr. Shobharani ma'am, would you unmute yourself and please speak? I think she has lost
I think regarding books or journals, something like that.
Yes, something that she can read, absolutely. The two essays by Mary Shelley that I quoted, The English in Italy and Recollections of Italy, and I absolutely strongly recommend you to read her travelogue, Rambles in Germany and Italy, which is actually the last work that Mary Shelley published, because as you know, the last years of her life were visited by this tumor, this disease that she had, which actually prevented her from writing, from even standing and sitting at a table. She had to lie down most of her time. So Rambles in Germany and Italy is probably one of the most insightful works by her, which is not much known, but it deserves to be studied. Absolutely.
Elisa, you are a very good scholar of Indian literature also. I know I have heard your lectures and I have read also some papers. Tell me, who are the writers, novelists, poet you admire of India?
Of India, okay. Well, I very much admire the work of diasporic Indian writers. For example, a very good writer and a very good friend of mine is Basha B. Fraser, and she's an excellent poet, and she also delved into the oral histories of the partition. She published a collection of short stories and narratives that she translated from various languages into English, entitled Bengal Partition Stories, focused on the partition of Bengal. And that really deserves to be read. And another most favorite writer of mine is Tabish Kher, who lives in Denmark, and another contemporary Indian writer that I absolutely adore is Manju Kapoor. Manju Kapoor is really in my heart. I absolutely adore everything that she has written.
We met Tabish Kher also in Lucknow seminar. You remember?
Yes, absolutely. I do remember. Yeah.
Ma'am, there is a question in chat box.
Yes.
Shri Nurul Huda, he says, thank you, ma'am. French Revolution has a strong connection with the Romantic poets. How far do you think Italian political situations have the impression on the Romantic poets, if any?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. As I told you, Lord Byron also was intimately influenced by the Italian political situation, and there are references to it in Childe Harold's Pilgrimage. And talking about the novels by Mary Shelley, references to the Italian political situations are embedded also in a beautiful novel that I strongly recommend you to read, especially in this period of pandemic, which is entitled The Last Man, a novel that she published in 1826. And this novel deals with the pandemic spreading from the east, arriving into the west, and caused, it is possible to infer, caused by greed, colonialism, and the prevarication of one country over another. And so there are also many references to the Italian political situation in that. So for sure Byron, for sure Shelley, for sure Percy Shelley, they also were strongly committed to the Italian cause and inserted many references to that in their works.
Can I ask?
Yes, sir. Please go ahead, sir. Yes, please.
I really appreciate this very thought-provoking and insightful lecture. And it has been really a matter of great pride and privilege for us to have listened to you. Actually, as far as the Romantics are concerned, I think Shelley and Byron had many associations with Italy. And during the years of the exile, they were there in the Italy, and we can see the influences of Italy in their works. Even John Keats in 1820, while he was in the last stages of suffering from the tuberculosis, he was there, and even Thomas Hardy. So I think Italy has had a great relationship with the Romantics, even the Renaissance, right from the French Revolution, even the Napoleon, we can see right from the Napoleon. So, So is there any difference in approach of the Romantic description of Italy in all these works of the British writers? Because Italy and British had a close ties and relationship with each other since long. So I do appreciate this.
Yes. As I told you, Mary Shelley was different from all the others because all the others loved Italy, but they did not believe in the Italians. They did not believe in the power of the Italians for doing something for themselves. So they, both Byron and Percy Shelley believed that the British had to lead the way because the Italians were not capable of doing things for themselves. Whereas Mary Shelley thought that they simply had to rediscover what they had always been in history. And in her view, the works from the past, or the works from Michelangelo, Raphael, all the important artists coming from Italy had to inspire current day Italians to change their situation. So Mary Shelley was much more positive towards the Italian than all the others. There is even the Victorians had this idea of Italy as a beautiful country, but the Italians were, like children that needed the guidance, the leadership of the British in order to emerge from their situation. Whereas Mary Shelley did not believe that. This is the most important difference in my view.
And Byron too had many affairs with the Italian women. And that's why
yes. That's Italy, absolutely.
Yeah, that's why that contributes to the writing of all this literature.
Yes, but Teresa Guiccioli was also connected with the Carbonari. So she was actually a relative of Pietro Gamba, who was one of the most important Carbonaro. And through his relationship with women, he also approached the Italian political situation. So there is also another question, I think. Can you draw a comparison between Dante's Italy and Mary Shelley's Italy, especially political Italy? Yeah. Yes. Valperga, for example, that is the other novel set in Italy, written by Mary Shelley, delves into the political situation of Middle-Age Italy. And she actually draws a comparison between the political oppression of the past, even of Dante's time, and the political oppression of the present. So in her view, just different forms of political oppression had succeeded one after the other, but the oppression just remained the same. So she just wanted to boost the Italian population to react, not to lose their stamina, not to lose their power, their intellectual power, which in her view was the key to success. I'm reading also the other comment. Maybe Mary Shelley was free from egoism. Yeah, Mary Shelley was very sympathetic towards the Italians. She was not self-centered at all. This is a characteristic of all her life. And she was very keen towards the other. She did not consider the other as the other, but as a different facet of herself. That's why she bonded very much with the Italians.
Compliments are pouring in, ma'am. Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Before I think I invite our moderator, ma'am, I would like to introduce her. Are there any other questions?
Chairperson, Smita, chairperson.
Chairperson? Yes. Yeah, I think we should go ahead. We are indeed delighted to have another interesting personality, Dr. Jaya Kapoor, an associate professor in University of Allahabad, teaching in the Department of English and Modern European Languages. We are very fortunate to have ma'am as a chairperson for this session. Ma'am has also and PM Vidyapeeth Allahabad since 1997. She has worked on partition of India and literature and theatre in India as major areas of interest and her specialization. She's been awarded DPhil for her work on self-exploration and social confrontation in the plays of Samuel Beckett and Eugene O'Neill in 2002 by University of Allahabad. She has published a book with the title The Dramatic Journey of Eugene O'Neill and Samuel Beckett by well-known international publisher Partridge Publications in June 2020. Have published various research papers in national and international journals and anthologies. She has been a resource person at various national and international seminars and conferences. Apart from this, she has also delivered various lectures in faculty development programs of English and UGC HRDC centers of various universities. She has supervised 6 awarded theses and has more than many scholars working under her supervision. She has been associate at Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla in 2008 and a fellow at ASRC Hyderabad. She has been deputy director of UGC HRDC, University of Allahabad. Her biodata actually runs in pages. I have to literally compress it. Ma'am's area of specialization under the subject discipline are culture studies with special focus on literature on partition, theatre studies with special focus in modern Indian drama, contemporary Indian fiction in English, Indian literature in translation. Ma'am has been felicitated for her contribution to society and academics by several prestigious educational organizations and Election Commission of India and Plus Refract Club of India as well. She has been associated with social service organizations working on disabilities as well. We are indeed very delighted to have you, ma'am. Welcome in this session and over to you.
Thank you, Smita-ji. Actually, this was not supposed to be so long. I had just sent that entire thing and I thought Shanaz is going to edit it to suit the needs of the program. But anyway, thank you so much.
Jaya ma'am, you are muted and we cannot see your video also.
Okay, yeah. Now am I audible?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So as I was saying, this was not supposed to be such a long introduction. Just sent some stock material. I thought Shaminaz will edit it to suit the needs. But anyway, thank you so much. And it has been a delightful session. Absolutely delightful. Because we do know of the Romantics and we do know of their passion for revolution and for changing the world. But then we knew that Shelley had been to Italy, that Keats had been to Italy and he spent his last days in Italy. What was very interesting was the way the perception of Mary and Percy differed on Italy. They were diametrically opposite probably. But come to think of it, maybe it could be rooted in the way that their entire mindset was working, the way that they were looking upon it, being with a critical mindset. Probably Percy was looking at it as a kind of a place where a political experiment could be possible, and without the kind of society that he saw back in England, where democratic values were very deeply rooted and it was very easy to bring a systemic change. Things were more difficult there with the kind of governments that were in place, the despotic, the autocratic governments that were in place at that point in time. So it was also a tailor-made situation for revolt, but it was also a situation which proved practical difficulties. So once again, thank you so much, Elizabetha. And this has been a pleasure. It's been some of it has been quite a revelation. Especially loved the bit about Mary Shelley. Come to think of it, when we look at the entire development of the growth of English literature, probably this relationship between the Romantics and Italy, we will go back to Renaissance, which is the first Romantic age, and we find Chaucer going to Italy and coming back from Italy and writing probably what were his best works. His Canterbury Tales has got a very deep influence of Boccaccio's the Decameron. And then once again, as we move later into his career, we find him writing The House of Fame, which once again is very deeply influenced by his stay in Florence in 1373, because he came back in 1373 and then straight away went on to write all these works. So probably this kind of an influence has been there. Especially in the early phases, we find Petrarch and Boccaccio having a very deep influence, and this is where when we come to the Elizabethan age, you find in England, especially Wet and Surrey. So the people who introduced the sonnet, there you find Wet talking about the Petrarchan sonnet, actually translating the first Italian poetry into English, and trying to come to an understanding of Italian literature, which at that point in time was probably at the height of its beauty and conventions of love and the romantic love, and also a very interesting idea of the Platonic, what is the Neoplatonic. Because this is what connects, the way I see it, this is what connects the idea of the Platonic society, which is present in Shelley also. The idea of the spiritual enlightenment, which is present in Shelley, is probably here where the first seeds are being sown in the views of Sidney, in the views of Spencer, when they are writing their poetry. So we find Sidney in his Astrophel and Stella once again using Petrarch, using the Petrarchan sonnet, endorsing Platonism through his works, through spiritual enlightenment. And then later on, as we move to the other poets, the master himself, Shakespeare, once again using the Petrarchan conventions of love. But then this is where probably something very interesting is happening. This is the love-hate relationship that I was talking about, where you find Shakespeare not just very deeply influenced by the Italian poetry, but also contradicting it, wanting to get out of it, wanting to get out of it and establishing his own identity. And so this was this I thought of bringing this up because he was wanting to establish its own metaphor. And there is this very small poem that I wanted to share on this occasion, where how deeply the Petrarchan metaphor was rooted in his mind and how he was struggling to come out of it and establish his own identity. I'll just read this out, and I think you're going to find it interesting. Here he says, my mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun. The metaphors that he's using are very Petrarchan, and then he's denying those metaphors simultaneously. Coral is far more red than her red lips. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun? If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damask, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes there is more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. He uses the word reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music had a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go, my mistress when she walked treads on the ground, and yet, by heaven, I think my love as rare as any she belied with false compare. Now this is interesting because this is where he's trying to establish its own identity. But then over a period of time, we find this relationship between classicism that has its origins in the Italian literature and the romantic idea coexisting. There's not a big clash, but then by the time we come to the romantics, this clash actually gets into a kind of a battle, that there is a complete denial. And this denial is probably where this idea to assimilate it, to transform literature, is completely denied, and a new kind of metaphor is looked for. And so going back to Italy in order to find that, once again, Byron is doing it, Shelley is doing it, Keats is doing it in his own way, he's trying to do it, probably defines this unique relationship. It's not like the English relationship with French, which is one of a competitor, more a competitor or a sibling. With Italy, probably it's more like you wanted to learn something because of the presence of the Roman culture and the rest of Italy having its own unique flavor, very different from Rome. So this blend was probably very attractive for the Romantics. So when they go out there, they are fascinated by it and they find it probably worthwhile indulging in this kind of a thing. Another thing was, and that probably is the reason why the Romantics wanted to go to Italy or were attracted to Italy, in my view, the way I have been looking upon it and the way very clearly Elizabetha, your lecture shows it, is that the Italian idea of Romanticism was not aesthetic artistic, in the sense that it was not just an expression in terms of abstract art. Here was an actual political movement, political upheaval happening, protest happening. So the Romantic idea was socio-political. It was actually being implemented. Shelley's own political views were getting rooted, and they were getting reinforced by what was happening in Italy at that point in time. His own socialist ideas, his own ideas, the power of the common man were becoming stronger with his views of what was happening in Italy. Probably that is what fascinated both Byron and Shelley, and probably that is also what holds Mary Shelley in such a fixation with Italy. So once again, to conclude, probably I would say that this has been a time where there was a clear movement away from the past traditions into a completely new way of thought. And so Romantics in Italy gave a new direction to the way literature was moving in England. And probably this new direction had a lot to do with their views with their stay, with their interaction with Italian literature, with Italian ideas, and with the people of Italy. So thank you so much, and this has been a lovely interaction. Thank you once again. Thank you.
Thank you.
And once again, I would like to thank Professor Ghanshyam, Smita ji, and of course Chamenaz for inviting me here and for giving me the honor of chairing the session, and for all the organizers and the audience for their interesting questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Jaya ma'am, for your scholarly remarks and your time and your expertise. Over to you, Shami.
I request Priyanka to give vote of thanks.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. What a wonderful session it was. I want to thank Miss Elizabetha Marino, madam, for this wonderful, enriching, and pleasant experience. Your talks on the history of Italy and their connection to the Romantic writers of that time was really illuminating and enjoyable at the same time. And you gave us a new insight into the Romantic writings of that time. Now, if I may, I want to add a personal note here. Some months ago, some 4 or 5 months ago, I heard your lecture on transcendentalism, and before that webinar, I attended 3 or 4 webinars. So my impression of webinars was that these webinars are total waste of time because the resource persons are not able to make the person understand a single thing. But then I heard you, and then you made me believe in these webinars as a medium of learning. So thank you for that. And now I want to thank Dr. Jaya Kapoor Madam for their enriching insights into this Italy and this romanticism. Thank you so much, Madam, for your valuable observations and your remarks. And then I want to thank Dr. Shaminaz Madam for this wonderful session. It is quite difficult to organize these kinds of sessions. It requires really hard work. And Madam, you pulled this off quite well. So thank you for this webinar. It was really productive and beneficial for all of us. And then I want to give my thanks to Dr. Ghansham sir, who is the founder and the general secretary of ISPIL. It is because of you gurus that we are having this opportunity to enhance our knowledge and to elevate ourselves. So thank you, sir, for this opportunity. And then I want to thank Dr. Smita Nayak ma'am for managing this whole event excellently. And then after this, I want to thank all the participants who actively joined, gave their comments, who asked questions and made this event even more interesting. And finally, I want to thank Mr. Nurul Hoda sir, who helped diligently to make this event a success. So now I want to invite Mr. Nurul Hoda sir to present the certificates. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Give me a time, Priyanka. I would like to thank some more people like Pramod Dingle sir, who has always been helpful in making certificates and brochure. Thank you, Pramod Dingle sir, for your support and cooperation. So, Elizabetha, this is a token of love from India to Italy. It is a certificate of appreciation for your wonderful lecture.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Next, Jaya ma'am, this is for you certificate of appreciation as a chairperson for giving such an insightful about ma'am's lecture and your own experience.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Shaminaz. It's been an honor to
Thank
be
you.
here. Thank you.
This is for Smita, certificate of appreciation for Smita for wonderfully conducting this event.
Thank you, Shami. Thank you, Ghansham sir, and thank you, Team ISPL.
And this, the last for Priyanka, certificate of appreciation for lending support in moderating this event. Thank you so much. So, sir, we would like to see your concluding remark about this today's event. Ghansham sir.
Thank you very much, Shaminaz. And after the vote of thanks and presentation of certificates, I don't think anything is needed. But I really appreciate the way Elizabetha has taken up the issue and the way she has made us to understand what romanticism is all about in Italy and how it has been moved and the various nuances which we haven't even thought of. She has explained it in such a great way. And moreover, Jaya ma'am has given a wonderful cherry on the cake, and both have collaborated, coordinated, and combined the things in such a great way that our Sunday Sahityak Satsang was a super hit. And indeed, the people, those who have joined us today, might have listened to these two giants on their deliberations and also on the topics. They might have been benefited at length and a lot. I do hope ISPEL will bring many more scholars like this, and the scholars who were there on the platform of ISPEL will remain with ISPEL forever in the international arena. And we have another platform called I Feel, which is an international platform wherein we are going to bring so many other scholars also. So wonderful to have you on the platform of ISPEL, and thanks a lot from India to Elizabetha, and thanks a lot to Dr. Jaya Chadda ma'am. Thank you.
Before we end, I would request everybody to be with us in our next Sunday event, which will be by a Turkish poet and novelist, Mushine Arda. She will be presenting a lecture on social responsibility of a writer. I request Eliza, Kian Pishkar sir and Anna Maria ma'am, if you wish to attend, you people are most welcome. So thank you everyone. We are ending our session now.
Thank you so much.